In the mid-2000s, Enbridge Incorporated, an Alberta-based company focusing on crude oil pipelines and the transportation of natural gas, proposed the Northern Gateway Pipeline project. This endeavor will result in two parallel 1,100-kilometer pipelines stretching from Frudenham, Alberta to Kitimat, British Columbia. The westbound pipeline would transport the crude oil from the Alberta tar sands to the new marine terminal in Kitimat, BC, where it would then be transported and exported via tanker to the USA and Asia.
The second eastbound pipeline would import natural gas condensate to thin the bitumen produced in Alberta. The pipelines, if built, would strengthen Canada's trade ties within the Asian markets, where the oil would be available and encourage ongoing success in Canada's growing energy industry. However, the project has been highly criticized by environmentalists and First Nations groups for its immense environmental, social, and cultural impacts. Both the pipelines and the course the tankers would take would endanger the delicate ecosystems and those that rely on them, already imbalanced by human activity.
The planned pipelines would cross over 1,000 streams and rivers, many of which are sites of sensitive salmon spawning. In addition, they would span the land of many First Nations that have worked hard to preserve their lands. Upwards of 200 tankers a year would wind their way through the narrow channels and inlets of the British Columbia coastline, through the migratory routes of gray whales and the feeding grounds of orcas. A single spill would devastate the coast for years.
Though Enbridge has stated that the pipelines would be monitored for signs of a spill, all metal pipelines corrode over time. The National Energy Board estimates that large petroleum pipelines will experience a spill every 16 years for every 1,000 kilometers in length. National Energy Board, 2004.
An environmental disaster, thousands of gallons of crude oil spilled, soaking marshlands and getting into waterways around the spill.
About 800,000 gallons of fuel, of crude oil, was able to seep into the creek before it was stopped.
Well, you heard it there. It is one of the worst environmental disasters ever.
Oil pipelines spill millions of liters of petroleum into the environment every year. Enbridge has experienced over 12 major spills during this millennium, including a recent spill into the Kalamazoo River in Michigan in July of 2010. An oil spill in BC would harm every part of the environment it touched and have lasting effects even after the costly and time-consuming cleanup efforts. Ultimately, the Northern Gateway Pipeline project would lead to 217 permanent jobs in Canada, but has a greater potential to severely damage and exploit the sensitive ecosystems of Western Canada.